In this video, we're going to look at the structure of Parliament. Canada's national government is located on Parliament Hill, and Parliament Hill is a very large complex, very majestic and historic. There's a Library of Parliament and then the two chambers, the House of Commons and the Senate. Now, the House of Commons and the Senate are both actually in temporary locations during a long-term renovation, but they're still functioning as they normally would if they were on Parliament Hill. The House of Commons has 338 seats, whereas the Senate has 105 seats. Each one has a different formula of representation and a corresponding function. Why do we need a bicameral system? Well, the idea is, and in a bicameral system, especially federations like Canada, it's important to balance different concerns. So the House of Commons, number one, is elected. The people in the House of Commons are elected to represent Canadians from each of the 338 ridings. So locally here in London, there are 3 different ridings. Each one of them will send a member of Parliament to Ottawa to act as their representative. Each riding across Canada will have roughly the same amount of people. That's the idea of representation by population. We take the population of Canada, divide it up into roughly equal parts, and then each one of those parts gets a member of Parliament. The Senate, by contrast, has regional representation. In a system where there's representation by population, the largest population centers will have more members. Therefore, the Senate is there to give some voice to the smaller provinces and the regions. There's also an aristocratic element to it, sort of in the tradition of the British House of Lords. Senators are appointed, not elected. And so there is an element of being above public opinion. So if public opinion is changing each election, the idea is that this is sort of meant to be a more reasoned voice to it. That's not necessarily a critique I agree with, but that's the origin, ostensibly, of what the Senate's function is going to do. Also, with that in mind, provide long-term stability. Governments can change really quickly, and popular sentiment might be attached to an idea that may not be in the long-term interest of Canada. Well, the thinking is, in theory, that if the House of Commons is trying to do something ridiculous, then the Senate can be a voice of sober second thought to provide long-term stability. They're not going to let the people's representatives do anything crazy. They will have a more measured and deliberative approach to passing legislation. Again, this is the theory. Doesn't always work that way in practice. How do they divide powers? Well, ultimately, both chambers have to approve legislation. So for a law to be passed, it has to go through the House and it has to go through the Senate. Both chambers need to put their stamp on it. However, the Senate does not have equal power in that it can't initiate what are called money bills. It can't sort of initiate a federal budget or spending bills. Those would have to start in the House. The Senate also has a suspensive veto. It can stop and delay things that Parliament does temporarily. It can't put a full stop to the process like the American Senate, for example. So the House of Commons, it is asymmetric bicameralism, where the House of Commons has a little bit more power than the Senate. Ultimately, the House could override the suspensive veto of the Senate.